Welcome to week 2, lecture 2, workshop history lab, or something like that, with the title after the colon, lecture notes. This is not so much a lecture. There is one PowerPoint slide, which I'm hoping you are looking at as you're listening to this talk. I'm not going to be going through each of those points necessarily in a very systematic way, but they'll all be part of what this is all about. And I want to start just by talking about the importance of these history labs, because you have 5 history labs throughout the semester. And technically, it's not really a lab. The term lab is short, of course, for laboratory work. It comes from the sciences. And so if you take an introduction to biology class, you'll have the lectures and you'll have a lab. Introduction to chemistry, or let's say, organic chemistry, then you'll have a lab. And on it goes. I'm sure that's something you're very familiar with from high school on. And what the laboratory work focuses on are practical skills and application and experience. So you actually experience doing the work of either a biologist of some sort, or a chemist, or whatever the lab is about. Focused on the subject and then on the specific topic. So that is an analogy. And so the workshop really is probably more descriptive and accurate for what I intend in these sessions. It would be more laboratory-esque, so to speak, if we were doing this in person. I actually have never done this component of the course in my in-person Western Civ courses. Next time I have the opportunity to do Western Civ in person, I think I may. Let's see how that will go. But I have done it before, certainly in my online Western Civ courses. Not every semester, not every time I teach it. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. We'll see how it goes. But the focus here is on skills and application. And history as a discipline, which is one of the definitions of the term history that I talked about before in the previous lectures last week, as a discipline in terms of doing history requires a lot of skill. One thing, we might say that the primary skill is to learn how to read. You say, well, wait a minute, I've learned how to read in kindergarten or first grade. Yes, well, great, I hope so. I hope everyone here knows how to read, so that when I assign you the textbook or the written lectures, I'll be talking about lecture notes on the written lectures too. But when I talk, assign for those documents for you to read or the textbook to read, that you know how to read. So that's not what this is about. It is how to read documents and sources historically. What do we make out of them? How can we approach these things? And they are things, they're physical things. Even if you're doing this all online, these are physical things. This lecture is a physical thing that you are observing online. The written lectures, even though they're posted there, they are physical things, and you can print them out, and then they are definitely physical things. And in some ways, as I'll get back to shortly, I would suggest, if at all possible, that the best way, the best theoretical way in all possible worlds would be to print out the written lectures. But that's another issue. I'll get back to that in terms of the lecture notes on the written lectures shortly. But it's critical reading. It's critical reading with a sense of getting the information out of what you're reading, distinguishing between the information, the interpretation, and the perspectives. And I think on the lecture slide those are the 3 elements that you need to be able to look for. What is information? What is interpretation? And what is perspective? And in some ways, those 3 there's fine lines between and separating those 3, but they are definitely distinct. And you need to make that distinction as you're reading and as you're taking notes. So I'll get back to that in a second, but that's what these are about. And again, you have to submit the first lab report, which you're required to do. I believe it's the end of next week. And don't worry about that. It's for 1 point. So even if you skipped all submissions of all history labs, just in terms of that, it would simply take 5 points off of your potential score. So the highest you'd be able to get in this course is a 95 out of 100 rather than 100 out of 100. But that is not in your best interest, number one. And number two, rightly or wrongly, I would like to think that the skills, as I'll be talking about in each of the history labs, um, will help you with the course and help you do better with the course overall. So that is why they're here. Because whether you are a freshman and this is the first time you've ever taken a college course, or whether you are a senior and this is the last requirement you need before you can graduate, and so you just want to get over and done with it, that's fine. Developing skills is important. I'm not going to elaborate a lot on this. And in some ways, this first chat or talk or lecture, whatever you want to call it, in terms of the history labs, will be a bit longer than the others because I'm setting things up. We're trying to set things up and prefacing the whole exercise and the whole assignments. Whereas the next time we have on the syllabus there, lecture week 6 or week 4, whatever it is, lecture 1, I forget exactly when the next history lab session or talk or chat is. It will be more focused simply on the title or the subject and the theme. Now, with the lab reports, don't worry about the lab reports. They're 1 point. They're graded for completion, basically. I will be reading each of your submissions. How would you not get that 1 point? Because everybody will either get 0 or a 1, 1 point. You can lose that 1 point if you simply submit a blank lab report. You at least put your name on it. And the lab reports, the rubric is given to you in course documents. It's also given to you in the module when they're due, I believe. If not, that was my mistake, but it's there for you in course documents that you can go back and get for everyone every time. However you do it. I mean, download it or keep it on your computer so you can fill it in however you want to do that. I think I would have to download it and save it and then fill it out as a Word document and then upload it into Canvas. But anyway, that's a technical aspect. What they're intended to do is simply to help you focus on what these skills are about. They're not trying to test you. Essentially, they're asking, did you pay attention? At least that's especially the first part, which is basically summarize what the lab was about, what the workshop history talk was about. As long as that is more than simply the title. So like for this first one, I hope you will write more for that first section on the rubric for the lab reports, simply lecture notes. Go through, what I talked about. You can talk about the introduction, you can talk about the importance of skills, and then when I get into actually talking about taking notes, you can talk about the different strategies for taking notes, you can talk about the distinctions between information and interpretation and perspectives or whatever. These are designed to help you. They're not designed to test you, but they're designed to help you. So as long as you show that you have paid attention and have thought about the material or the what I've been talking about, you'll be fine. And the second part then will ask you, how are you going to apply this? So if you just simply say, I will take notes, that's not going to help. Now, I'm not looking for any detailed, insightful, extensive answer on that. How will you apply for this? You can even say, I never even thought about taking lecture notes before. This has helped me give me some ideas for how to go about doing so, and I will review my notes as I as I begin to prepare for the exams. And I think this could really be a help for me, both for the written lectures and the video lectures or whatever, just one or the other. You don't have to cover both, okay? Does that make sense for people in terms of what I'm intending with this? And so unless you are completely off topic, if you were to say lecture notes are superfluous and don't have anything to do with the course as such, but they are an exercise that instructors put us through to make us do more work, that you're not going to get a point for. And with something like that, I might even then write to you or give in the feedback comments, say, look, contact me, because do you really think that is what you got out of the talk? Could be a problem there. So it's not a graded exercise except for trying to, okay, I want to compel you, force you to listen and pay attention. And listening is a skill, just as reading is a skill. And you've been able to listen to what people have said for since you were even before you could ever begin to learn to write. But listening and writing and reading, critical listening and critical reading are imperative. And just on a practical level, what do you do when you listen to a speech, a political speech, pick a political address? Do you just sit there and take it in and soak it in and, oh yeah, let it kind of affect you? Or do you listen to it critically as an historian would and try to discern the distinction between information, interpretation, and perspectives? So this is, I think, an important um, skill to have, not just for this course, even though I hope practically it will help you with this course, but it is one of those skills that liberal arts teaches you, and history is part of the liberal arts, that I think is so essential for the educated individual in society as well. But that's making it too grandiose perhaps for now. And we're going to get back to the practical aspect, the real workshop laboratory aspect of lecture notes. I just hope you can see how this ties into, on a practical level, your performance in this course, and then maybe also how you can apply it to other courses, and just in general. So that being said, I'm just going to check on this. I have videoed lectures and written lectures. I'll start with the videoed lectures, with that being the introduction. And also keep in mind that this is going to be a longer talk, so to speak, than for a workshop history lab than the subsequent ones will be, because I wanted to kind of set up the whole thing. And so the next time we have a history lab, I won't include all this introduction material. We'll just focus on the topic at hand. But for today, in the first one, it's lecture notes. Because you have then by now, I hope, have listened to and read 3 lectures. And so how do you go about taking notes in terms of the videoed lectures as a talk? I talked about listening critically. The PowerPoint slides are designed to help. They basically give you the outline of what I plan to say. Sometimes you may not believe me with this, but I do, for myself, follow the PowerPoint. Sometimes I'll go get away, I'll get off on a tangent, and I'll come back, and so, or I might forget a point. I might go back to a slide, or or jump forward to a slide. But the PowerPoint slides are there as a guide to the videoed lecture. So I would use them in that way. The PowerPoints at times present information. They do. Catalhoyuk, for example, in terms of the last lecture and the origins and emergence of civilization. There you get at least the date, approximately 7500 BCE. I think you also got there the estimated population of 5 to 10,000. That's information. But there's more information given orally in the lecture. That is important to distinguish. So you can't just focus on the PowerPoint slides. You need for the video lectures to use them as a guide to the actual video of the lecture. But they help you to already give you the structure for your notes. In some ways, too, if I would say that what's the best of all possible worlds way to do this, I would print out the PowerPoint slides, and I would have them on my desk as I'm listening to the lecture, and I would take notes, first of all, according to the PowerPoint slides. Or if I don't print them out like that, I would have my notebook, and I would certainly mark down and write down, copy over the structure of the PowerPoint slides, and take my notes accordingly that way. That probably could be an even better way to do it. Because number one, it has been shown, studies have shown time and time again, that when you write something, in terms of notes, in terms of even copying, the process of doing so sticks in your brain better and more securely, so to speak, than simply sitting back and listening passively. So that exercise of writing down the notes is important. So I think the best way to go about it, I would say, week one, lecture one, introduction to the course. There you have the written lecture two. We have the other written lecture as well. Get back to that. But let's just use, because in terms of content, last lecture was the moment with the real kind of information content. You'd write, week one or week two, lecture one, the emergence of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia, the title, and then you just go through with Roman numeral one slide, and then the subparts for each of the slides, and take notes as you're listening in those parts. So leave enough space for you to do so. So I would even not write down the next section or the next subsection until I can get there in the actual lecture. And so you take notes according to that structure giving you in the PowerPoint slides, which is an outline. So you already have the outline there. But seeing the outline is a big part of taking notes on a lecture, to see what did it go over, what were the topics, how was it built up, and what were the different aspects. And therefore, like last lecture, we had the emergence of civilization. And kind of within that, we had the emergence of writing, we had the emergence of religion and institutionalized religion. We had the emergence of law, the emergence of myth, and all of those come together. And what was the point of all that? The point of all that was to offer an interpretation and perspective on the theme of the lecture, the emergence of civilization. What was the information? The information, I won't go into the philosophical issues of facts and everything. It's a fascinating, fun topic to discuss, but we'd be here for I think longer than either of us want to be at this point if I started to try to argue with you and how there are no facts and it's all interpretation. But there are things that exist. The Code of Hammurabi is a thing that exists. It's a fact. You cannot deny that stela exists. You cannot deny what is written on it. You can have different interpretations of what is written on it, even in terms of the words or letters that are, carved into it. That it gets from the issue of information to the issue of interpretation, but the fact that it is there is information. What it says is information. What it means is interpretation. Now, in the lecture, I didn't delineate the distinction between the information I was presenting and then the interpretation I was presenting. It's all one and the same, as well as within the context of my own perspective on the development. You need to listen critically to discern the difference. I pointed out that the Code of Hammurabi was also evidenced the lex talionis, or the idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for the tooth, but did so also in terms of the class differentiation. Now, okay, what do we do with that? That is, on the one hand, information, because we can demonstrate from the text itself on the stela that is the case, that there are different consequences for committing the same act against different statuses of people. What does it mean? That is an interpretation. So often we assume what it means. We assume, therefore, that the king and the nobility, who had the greatest privileges, but still was an eye for an eye, they also had the greatest potential harm. I think I said in the lecture, if you accidentally, for example, put out the eye of another nobleman, your eye would be put out. If you put out the eye of the slave, now if a lower level person put your eye out, the penalties were even worse. So that gives counter evidence. But simply saying that if I'm a noble and I put out the eye of a slave, I have to pay the nobleman, that's much better than losing my eye. So the point is, or if a freeman, if I just pay a freeman, I'd much rather pay the money to a freeman for saying, oops, I'm sorry, buddy, I put out your eye by mistake. I wasn't intending to, here you go, than have my eye put out. So there's responsibility. That's one way of looking at it and interpreting it. It's not the only way. Interpretation always must be based on the evidence, on quote unquote facts, on the information. And the perspective that was offered then was how this artifact, in fact, artifact, thing that was made, that's the other thing, it was made. An artifact means made by art, by human beings. How it fits into the whole development of civilization. And I talked about that in terms of also bringing up Ketalhuyuk. There were facts too, quote unquote, or information, as well as interpretation, as well as perspective. The information was dating approximately to 7500 BCE. The information was that it was a dense settlement with specialization of labor, at least evidence of specialization of labor. And there was no wall and no monumental structure. Now, based on the excavations, we can say that. Now, the artistic representation of it, which I gave you, kind of shows that, but we can't point to that artistic representation as evidence. What we can do is to say that gives us a real kind of picture and understanding of what the actual excavations look like. And I gave you also a picture of what the actual excavation looked like. So what scholars have to do, archaeologists and historians, they look at the actual evidence, that archaeological site, and then based on that, they interpret what they find there to then claim that there was no monumental structure. So, well, okay, I don't know enough about archaeology and building materials and things to be able to tell, but you can say based on let's say, the depth of the foundations of each of the settlements, we can say this is a room, this is the room. There was no foundation found that was large enough, deep enough to support a monumental structure. That could be. Or it could be they didn't think of building a monumental structure. And they didn't think about building a wall. Maybe they didn't want a wall. Maybe they were peace-loving, free people. Or I mentioned, too, the fertility goddess figurine that was found there. They're nature lovers. They're doing a good job. They are hunting and gathering as well as kind of being settled, blah, blah, blah. They don't need a wall. They don't need a temple, and they don't need a king. So we could say they're an egalitarian society. That could be an interpretation. It could also be saying, well, they didn't need a wall because, as that artistic representation showed, there was basically marshlands and water all around. It's almost like they had a moat, a natural moat. They didn't need to worry about a wall. That could be too. You could say, just because they didn't have a monumental structure didn't mean that they didn't have the function of a priesthood and a king. So all these different problems arise in terms of interpretation. In terms of what do these facts, these pieces of information, mean for our understanding of what we're looking at. And the perspective would be, how does that fit in with what our previous understanding of the development of civilization was? That's what we're looking at. So I hope these kind of examples between information, interpretation, and perspective can help you sift through the lectures, because if you can show, okay, this is the information he's presenting. And in every lecture, I present information. In every lecture, I present interpretation. And in every lecture, I present perspective. I never say, oh, now I'm going to tell you my perspective. Or, oh, now I'm telling you my interpretation. Sometimes I'll say this is historians debate about this. That's what I said. That's not me, because I mean my specialty in the area of research is not ancient Mesopotamia. But scholars who focus on ancient Mesopotamia, they do debate these things. And that is all about differing interpretations. They're not really necessarily debating what they actually find and see. They might debate, what is it that they are looking at? This is, are ruins from this room. What type of a room was it? And you have scholars say, well, based on this and this, I think it might have been a scriptorium where things were written, but they didn't have writing. So that's a stupid statement from this point on my part. But let's say it was a storeroom. Based on the archaeological evidence, another historian might say, no, I don't think it's a storeroom. I think it is a room for the gathering of women. Okay, fine, blah, 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 blah. You can debate that, but there's no discrepancy or debate about actually what they're looking at. the debate comes with the interpretation of it. So the information is agreed upon, the facts are agreed upon, and the debate comes with what do those facts mean? We'll go into all of this, and certainly not on the political level, but there are no such things as alternative facts. There are facts, and then things that aren't facts that are accepted as facts. So we have that problem. This is a fact. It's like, no, that's not a fact. That's an interpretation, or that is a hypothesis, or that is what is maybe assumed or thought, but it's not an established fact. And that gets into the whole thing of what makes for a fact. How do we establish it? And all of those things, which is a real problem. But the perspective then is that, so what? So even if we interpret it in this way and see it as this way, how does that all fit in? What does it all mean in the greater picture? If we said this is an anomaly and has nothing to do with the rise of civilization because there's no writing, there is no temple, there's no evidence of a king of Catalhoyuk, and you can't have civilization without a king. Those are all perspectives that affect interpretation of what then can still be agreed upon in terms of the information and the artifacts themselves and the facts themselves. And the history tries to get at not only the information, the facts themselves, whether it is a text, in a manuscript, or in a papyrus that has been discovered, a new manuscript, but then the interpretation of that manuscript, and then the perspective one brings to it in terms of what does it all mean. Those is a constant development and argument of interpretation and meaning, and there's an ongoing discovery of artifacts. It's not that everything is a given. I talked about that in terms of the distinction between history 1 as everything that has ever happened, and then history 3, the extant historical record. That is the basis of it all. And it's not that the extant historical record is completely and thoroughly known. It's still a possibility. Every time we find, let's say, a sunken ship, a sunken warship from the Roman period, we didn't know about it before. That is part of the historical record, and it always had been because it was there to be discovered. Whereas again, as I mentioned, the library in Alexandria is gone. It's not there to be discovered. So even though it was part of history 2, recorded history, theoretically, it didn't make it into history 3, the actual historical record. And history 4, what historians write based on history 3, a historian can't take all of history 3 into account, even in a narrow-ish subject. So it's always selective, and the more artifacts we find, the more history changes. I have discovered manuscripts. At least 2 or 3 manuscripts. This guy I work on, late 14th century Augustinian Jordan Quedlinburg. What do I mean by discovered? Because scholars didn't know that they were there. Yeah, they were recorded sort of in 18th century catalogs. But no one had really looked at what it was or determined what it was. And it had just been missed over until I said, well, I'm going to actually look at this and think, oh my God, this is this work of Jordan's, which we thought was extant only in his autograph, which means a manuscript he wrote himself. It's a Paris manuscript, but I found 2 different copies of the entire, it's called Collectanea manuscripts. They were sitting there in libraries, but no one ever looked at them. So that's kind of a discovery. It's not necessarily all that different from discovering a sinking ship. It wasn't known before, even though it was there. It was there. Just hadn't been seen before. And that is exciting. That changes our entire interpretation, not only of the thing itself, but also of how it relates to the other things around it, which then affects our perspective on it, what does all mean for the context and the period and in the greater scheme of things. That's why it's so exciting. And to listen to a lecture and to try to discern the difference between the information that's being presented, the interpretation that's being presented, and the perspectives that are being presented is a difficult task and a hard task. I hope you will enjoy the lectures. I hope you have already. I hope they can be engaging, but they're not really about entertaining. I'm not trying to entertain you. You may say, well, sometimes it sure seems like you're trying to entertain us. You're doing jokes, making you. I'm trying to communicate. And it would not be effective communication in my mind if I sat here and looked at notes and just read my written lecture. That would not be effective communication, in my view. I've experienced that. It's not pleasant. But the whole point is not to say, isn't it exciting to come into lecture? I hope it is exciting to come to lecture. But the point is not for me to entertain you. It is to relate things to you, to help communicate things to you as part of the course material on which your grade is based. Now, that kind of covers that. With the written lectures, I think the best way to do it is print them out and then highlight and underline and take notes in the margins. That's what I would do. They are written, the outline is kind of given as they go along with the different sections. So what sticks out to you and what questions do you have? That's the big thing too. Also, whether you're listening to the video lecture or are taking notes on the written lecture, what are your questions? Do you have a question about something? It's like, did he really say that? What does he mean? Write that down. Or if you're reading, it's like, I don't understand this. And then send me an email. Say, can we talk about this? Or can you explain you said this and I don't understand what you're meaning by that? Because the understanding what I'm presenting is important. And you have to at least understand it. You don't have to agree with it on the exams, but you have to be able to understand it. And if you disagree, argue why and on what basis. Now, lecture notes are so important, both on the written and the videoed, to help to learn and grasp and synthesize the course material with the textbook. I think there's a history lab on reading the textbook. I'm not sure. But that's what we do. And then because you can sit down, I need to review the lectures. You can sit and listen to them all again, or you can look at your lecture notes. So, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that. And if you need to, this was really dense, then you can go back and listen to it again. Or the same with the written lectures. You have your lecture notes on the written lectures. You say, yeah. Oh, I need to look at that again, and go back and look at it again. And if you've already printed it off, you'll have it right there. That is what this is all about. I hope this is making sense. I certainly have tried to help. I'm not going to belabor this point too much. I'm going to kind of wrap things up here for now, because that is what this is intended to do, is to help you learn the course material. And whether you like it or not, the lectures, written and videoed, are 50% of the course material. That means if you ignore the lectures, the best you can get is 50%, which is an F. Same way if you ignore the textbook, the highest you can get is 50%, which is an F. Now that is really making it into quantified, nice little blocks. And that's not how I grade at all. But in your exams, there should be evidence that, yes, you have read the textbook and you know what the textbook is doing. And yes, you dealt with the lectures. And here's like video lectures or written lectures. I think I addressed that. Whichever way you learn best, focus on that, even as both are assigned. I hope that, and again, if you have questions about that, let me know. But that's the idea. And I'm not going to be, when I grade your exam, I do look for evidence from the textbook. And therefore, if you cite the textbook, that's a help. It makes it clear and easy. Or if you cite the lectures, that's a help. It makes it clear and easy. So I'm going to be looking for evidence from the textbook as part of the course material and from the lectures as part of the course material. But I'm not going to say, okay, I'm not going to subdivide the lectures. I'm not going to say, okay, 25% of the course material are the written lectures, 25% are the video lectures, and 50% is the textbook. The lectures are 50%. The textbook is 50%. So how well you learn the material of the lectures, either with a video or by reading, the better it will be for your grade. And taking effective lecture notes with the structure of the lectures there, so taking those according to the structure given you, and with questions, and then you can go back and ask me about the questions that you might have. You can also ask yourself and try to answer your own questions. That's a great way of studying and going about it. You can learn the material and demonstrate that you've learned the material. And that's what this is all about. So you can develop your own perspective on Western civilization from the origins to approximately 1600. That's what this is all about. Thank you for your patience. I hope you will find this helpful. And as you go through the course, I hope you'll look back on this and say that was a big help and a great value. It will at least be worth 1 point. So, I would right now, if you already haven't done this, I would get the lab rubric and I would be filling it out as you go. So then you have it done. You just have to then. I should have addressed that too. That's what I would do with this for the next one. Then you have the lab rubric. I would have that by my side as I'm listening to these workshop lab history labs, and take notes as you go, because then you just type it up and submit it. It's all done and dusted, easy peasy. Showed my age and everything else, easy peasy. It's a piece of cake or whatever else you want to say it is. So that's how I go about it. Don't worry about it. I hope it will be a help. That's what it's intended to be. If you have any questions about any of this, please, again, just ask, and I'm here to help. That's what this is all about. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.